Metro Louisville is made up of 26 districts. This podcast gives you a chance to connect with your council member and learn about what's going down in your district.
Welcome to the District Download Podcast. I'm Kyle Etheridge, and today's episode will feature one of our newer council members and his father for a discussion on politics and public service. At this time, I'll turn it over to our guest moderator, Rachel Platt, to introduce our guests.
I am so excited about this one, inspired by an event we did at the Frazier, and I said, we have got to get Andrew Owen and Dad Tom here together to do a podcast. So thank you all for doing it. And I called it Like Father, Like Son? Question mark. So we're going to answer a little bit of that today. So Andrew Owen, of course, newly elected to the 9th District. Tom served on the Board of Aldermen from 1990 to 1998, Metro Council from 2003 to 2015, with a run for the mayor in 1998. So looking at all of that public service, my first question is to you, Andrew. Did your dad inspire this as far as to run for council?
Of course.
There was no cliffhanger, right?
Is the easy answer. Yeah, I mean, just like I think a doctor's children are more likely to follow in their footsteps because you see what that profession is like. I think that's true of most things. But I think maybe even more true for public service from two aspects. One, you see the impact that is possible, and that's really exciting. And you see all of the things that you can accomplish in that realm. So that's a very interesting and exciting thing that is a motivator, I think. And then there's also, I think, generally a fear of politics and campaigning. And if you've seen it up close, and you know that your father, in this case, is just a person, it's not as scary as it might be otherwise if you hadn't had that front row seat. So in that sense, yes, definitely. And in the case of my dad, if there's one thing I can say about him, it's that nobody ever questioned his reason for doing what he did in public service. Everybody always knew that he did it for the right reasons, that he did it to make his community better. And so if that isn't something to shoot for from my perspective, or a reason to follow in those footsteps, I don't know what would be.
I love that. So when you hear that, Tom, I mean, you were always deep-rooted in public service, from minister, historian, politician. Where did that come from? Because there were postal carriers in your family, right? Which was a sense of public service. Where did it come from with you?
I think very early, I was able to understand this place. I'm not sure that I would have been useful or helpful in public service in Des Moines or St. Augustine. I mean, I just think that it is this place, my identity with this place, my early childhood traveling around with grandparents and parents into virtually every neighborhood of the community. My father was raised here. He told stories about neighborhoods and place, the city's history, changes, all of that kind of thing. So I think the key for me has been place.
So the connectedness to it, and in every fiber.
The connectedness to this place, yes.
But you were inspired, if I remember correctly, in some of our conversations with JFK, Profiles in Courage.
Yes.
So you did pay attention as a student of democracy and those kinds of things. I think even at your high school in Atherton, you won like the cup for speaking.
The state champion for I Speak for Democracy.
All right, I knew it was. I didn't know state
you
champ.
Remember
Forgive
well.
me.
Yes, you remember well. I think now I put that into what I would call the political romantic side of me. Did I memorize the presidential oath of office when I was 13 years of age? Of course, yes, I did.
Well, that was really typical.
Not. So, but that's a romantic side. It's the more nitty-gritty side. It's the love of people, the love of stories, the love of place, the love of every area of the community. I don't know. I can't put my finger on everything. I can just say, did I have a bag in my backpack um, in 1964 picking up aluminum cans or metal cans for recycling? Yeah, I did. And I don't know. I've just always wanted to be involved in helping the community, cleaning the community, improving the community, people, all of that.
When you say people, because there was one thing that struck me in some of our past conversations, you've always been intrigued and cared about the human condition.
Yes.
And I thought that must be an essential quality as well for a politician to better the human condition, to better, I guess, make conditions for folks.
Well, bear in mind, when I was 14 years of age, I believed that I was destined to be a Methodist minister. So that's part of that identifying with human need, with the complexity of the human condition, the ambiguity of the human condition. Things aren't simply good. I never was what they called a Manichaean, good and evil only. There was always a lot of blend of grays in the human condition. So identifying with that both personally and in the community, I think that's another aspect of it. Yes, I do.
When you hear that, Andrew, what do you think of?
Well, immediately what I thought was, should it be a prerequisite to get in public service, to be in politics, to care about the human condition and want to improve people's lives? It should be. I don't think it always is necessarily. I think that's somewhat unique to Dad. I think not unique to him, but I certainly think from my perspective, it's what I noticed about him in his public service that was unique. And you hope that more people follow in those kind of same footsteps and have that same approach.
So your district, tell us what that covers, and then tell us a little bit about when you ran, what you were hoping to improve. What got you in that you said, you know what, I think I can do this?
So my district is the 9th District, and the 9th District is Frankfort Avenue runs up the middle of the 9th District, and then when it turns into Shelbyville Road, the 9th District continues down Shelbyville Road. We start at Melwood and Frankfort, come up through Clifton, have Crescent Hill in the district, and a little sliver of Clifton Heights is still located in the district, and then a large part of St. Matthews. So that is a mostly historic area of Louisville, pre-war and some post-war there in St. Matthews. But so that's the district, and I guess my urban planning background, I think, informs my approach to my district and to the community. I was always fascinated by neighborhoods and cities and how they work and how they don't work, and how the built environment affects people's lives within cities and within neighborhoods. So wanting to improve transportation and connection and make particularly our commercial corridors be a place that people wanted to be.
I think your mantra, the more a place is a space you want to be, which I love because that helps guide apparently decisions that you make.
Absolutely. And so that, to me, if Frankfort Avenue, if Lexington Road, if Breckenridge Lane, if those are places that you want to be out with your family, walking, taking a stroll, biking, pop your head in a shop and buy something, go stop at a bar or a restaurant and get a drink. Those are all things that are good for community. They're good for small business, which is another thing that I'm very much a proponent of. I've said many times that I think the 9th District is the best district in Louisville, in part because we have more local shops and businesses than any district in Metro Louisville. And I think that makes us unique. And I'm certainly interested in helping those small businesses continue to survive and hopefully thrive. And I think focusing on the built environment and infrastructure within that environment is a way to do that.
I'm going to get to you in just a second to ask about what you see are some of the threads, issues still facing the city from when you were in office. You left for a while and then came back to Louisville. Did that change your perspective in any way? Did you appreciate Louisville more? How did that impact your psyche?
I think it's there's no way that it cannot change the way your perspective is. You broaden your perspective. I spent some time in Arizona, spent some time in Virginia, Washington, a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and then did, some things in Europe here and there. But seeing what other cities are like and things about those cities that you like and that you don't like definitely adds a perspective, not only over and against what you're used to from your hometown, but I think it definitely made me appreciate Louisville in a way that I never could have before I left.
What was it that you missed the most that you said, I've got to get back to my hometown?
The thing that easily I missed the most, and part of this was the juxtaposition with Washington, D.C., which is a very transient city. It's a city that people come and go. They stay with because they're there with an administration and then they leave. There was very little pride of place in Washington, D.C. People you do not meet people who
They're not
are
from there.
Second, third, fourth generation people from Washington, D.C. And the thing that I think is so interesting about Louisville, and sometimes we're over the top about it, and sometimes it doesn't work. It's to our detriment. But we as Louisvillians are proud of Louisville. And when people come here, we want you to like it as much as we do. And it's one of the things that I think informs our hospitality as a city and as a community. We want people to like Louisville. And so we try to put our best foot forward. People come in, we try to take them to all the places we love. And so that pride of place, I think, is something that I really missed and was happy to get back to when I moved back.
Dad, I'm assuming you were thrilled when he came back.
Of course. All of our three children wandered very broadly. A daughter more broadly than the others, but the two sons did wander. And there were times when all three of our children did not live in Louisville, and we wondered, Phyllis and I wondered if they would ever return. As it turned out, all three have been back 15, 20 years, and all three are really very close and live close and all of that. So,
I know you love that. And the connectedness that your son feels, though, with that pride of hometown, which is, of course, something that you talked about at the beginning of this podcast. Did he come to you for advice or counsel when he thought he was going to run?
I think we certainly talked about it. Andrew, when he was in college, he had a particular interest in history, then in cities. I should have known that he had that gene, that community service gene, but frankly, I did not focus on it like you would think I would.
Interesting.
I began to kind of hear hints, but no more than a year and a half ago, that he was interested in running for public office. So it kind of came as a little surprise, to tell you the truth.
He did listen all those years,
Yes,
right?
he did.
Absolutely.
Yes, he did.
He just didn't. He wasn't hearing the hints, or maybe I wasn't saying it very loudly. But it's something I've thought about for a long time.
Well, that's interesting.
Maybe I just wasn't talking about it.
So,
Well,
go ahead.
I will say that I muddled about running for office in the 1980s, and my wife, by 1988, said, it's time to either quit talking about it or doing something about it.
She was tired of hearing it, right?
I don't want you sitting in a rocking chair saying, I could have, I should have, I would have, I might have, but if you're going to do it, do it.
Just go ahead and do it.
Yes, that's
so you
exactly
didn't
right.
mull over quite as long as he did.
Well, Nancy said the same thing to me, though. In one sense, I mean, I got cold feet one time after I made the decision that I was going to do this, and I went to Nancy and I said, "What am I thinking? This is nuts. I like my life the way it is." And she kind of said the same thing that Mom said to Dad, which is, if you don't do it now, you're going to regret not doing it. I had said enough to her over the years that she knew I had thought about it, and so she kind of said, "Go."
The spouses conspired and said, "Quit talking about it and
right.
just do it."
That's right.
I would love your perspective, with Andrew in office and everything that the city is facing. What are the biggest changes you think from the time that you served to the time your son is serving?
Obviously, our entry in 2020 into a new season of racial reckoning with Breonna Taylor's murder and the aftermath of 100 days of downtown demonstrations and activism. Clearly, that seems to me to be a threshold of another season of racial reckoning. So I think the community, I think the nation, I think the city is going to be struggling for equity, struggling for some kind of racial justice, broader racial and educational justice. I think that's an issue that's fundamental. And then blending into that, but adding COVID and its impact on work suddenly provides significant challenges for the city center. Mm-hmm. We had in 2019 and 2018 what I thought was an increasingly vibrant city center. Now, fewer people are coming to work in what were office spaces in tall towers.
Absolutely.
Fundamentally providing an additional challenge for the community. And then in addition to that is the whole question of how are we going to be a community that is healthy? And I mean environmentally healthy. I mean climate healthy, and how that relates to transportation issues, development issues, density issues. All of those things seem to be putting us on the cusp of a season that we are deeply in now of significant challenge.
Respond to that. Agree with it?
Absolutely. All of those things. The one piece that I would say is so different as well is the way information gets out to people. I mean, that is night and day different. When he first ran for office, he didn't have a website.
I mean, yeah. I mean, when you think about...
Yeah.
And, there was no social media. There was a fairly healthy community newspaper where most people got their news. There were people still watched the evening news in a way that they frankly don't anymore. And not all of those, many of those changes from my perspective are not for the better. So keeping people straight on what's fact and what's not fact, and making sure people are getting information that is filtered as little as possible is a completely different world.
I was going to ask you something as far as your dad seemed to be, you talked about public transportation. You talked about picking up those aluminum cans. A lot of people felt your dad was ahead of his time, right? I mean, you were green before green was really in. I mean,
some people thought he was strange. In retrospect,
but look at
you're exactly right. Especially in hindsight, it looks more like he was ahead of his time
absolutely
than it does. And I said that the other night.
Yes,
that I think, particularly as it related to the mayor's race, and that was an interesting thing. But I do think that there were things about him that people weren't ready for. During that primary campaign.
We should say that you rode your bike to this interview today.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
We needed to point that out.
Yes.
Let's talk about that bid for mayor because you walked, I can't remember how many, more than 100 miles. Oh, wait, 29 miles in every ward.
Yes.
So you did that.
Well, that was one weekend.
Yeah.
Just one weekend.
One weekend.
Yeah.
One weekend.
That was
less more than 100, I'm sure, at the end of all of it.
Oh, Lord.
Thousands.
Oh, yes.
Thousands.
Yes.
So your candidacy, you were the type of candidate, that was that connectedness. You wanted to walk, you wanted to be present, you wanted to meet and handshake and those kinds of things. Is that even still done? I mean, I think the current mayor did with his running. I think if I had to think of something that kind of feels like that same vibe, would be that. What were your lessons learned for that bid for mayor?
I think a couple of things quickly as I'm thinking back on it. One is that and I was thinking actually about this last night, not anticipating this conversation, but on another issue, that some of the people that you think of might be liberal, progressive, and willing to take risk on a candidate who is a little unusual. And may I say that I think I fit that mold. That in fact, they have a very, very conservative streak, which means they don't want to take risk on a candidate. They have a predictable sense of what they can expect and what they can get out of a candidate if they are successful. So that was a kind of a surprise to me. The other thing that I loved, and this, looking back, I have no regrets at all, is that there are people willing to be excited and energized. And we clearly had a candidacy, a campaign that was attracting people that had not usually been involved, who joined us on a 29-mile-long walk through the city over 2 days, who were inspired by the fact that on that walk, I spent with Phyllis 2 nights in the homes of people in the West and in the South, staying all night with them.
Wow.
And that I committed, now whether I could have delivered this if I had been successful, that I committed to spending 1 night a month sleeping in each of the 12 wards of the city.
I actually really love that.
Well, I made that commitment. Whether I could have delivered it or not is another thing.
I'm pretty sure you would have been doing that solo. Mom, I don't know that Mom would have.
But again,
Connectedness.
it's that connectedness, sense of place. Your place has value. Your place has value. No place has less value than some other place. And so that comes from a sense of history, that comes from a sense of human connectedness, all of those things.
But you walk the walk. And I think that is one thing that you've said from the very beginning. There was never a question as far as motive. Was it political prowess? Was it expedient for you to do that? It was you did it because in your gut it told you the right thing. Are politics in any way, shape, or form like that today? I see things as nasty and siloed. And
Certainly, I think any time that you can show people that you not only know about the community, the city you live in, and I've said it before, nobody knows this community better than Dad does. He knows the way the water runs in the community. We talked about that before, the way the creeks flow, the way the ditches, drain an area. He knows why a road is named the way it is historically. He knows the people. He's lived in a lot of the neighborhoods. So I think what you were doing was saying to everyone as clearly as you could, I know this community better than anyone else, and I love this community more than anyone else. And if you find that attractive in a mayor, then I'm your person. I think that's what he was trying to show. So does that still exist? Absolutely it exists. I mean, if that no longer exists, then I think we've already lost in our democracy. I mean, if people, that's some of what I was talking about with pride of place. And when I talk about the 9th District, the pride I have in our small businesses. One of the reasons Nancy and I lived there is because we spent all our time going to Lots of Pasta and Rainbow Blossom and Blue Dog and all of those local shops and businesses in the 9th District. And I love that about the 9th District. So I have that pride of place not only in the 9th District, but in Louisville. I love this place too. And I want people to like it, like I was saying before, when people come to town. I want people to like it as much as I do.
Do we still have ability to reach across the aisle and work together?
For 1 year, I was president of the Metro Council, all of Jefferson County. My commitment to each of my colleagues, my 25 colleagues, is that I want to schedule a bicycle bus trip to your district and then join you in your showing me your district. I had 25 commitments. I had 25 offers. I think I ended up probably in that year's time only getting to about 11 or 12 maybe, almost half of my colleagues Republicans, Democrats, suburban, urban, all of the different districts in Metro Louisville, in the Metro government. But again, it was, I want to come to your place and see your place and feel your place and hear what the issues are in your place.
I have been pleasantly surprised
Good.
by my experience on Metro Council so far. We have a good group. And if
you feel that concern and passion and
I
care.
absolutely think that we're here as a group. We're here to make the community better. And I wasn't sure what I would find. Some of the people I knew, some from when Dad, that are kind of holdovers from when Dad was here, and some I knew from other experiences. But I didn't really know what I would find. I tend to think local politics generally is better as it relates to some of the nastiness, and some of the national politics are not quite, it doesn't quite come all the way down to the local level. That doesn't mean it doesn't some places and doesn't sometimes, but it's not nearly as bad. But I've been very pleased that at the end of the day, it's a relationship business, both with your constituents and with your colleagues. And we're all people. And if you have things that you are interested in, if you have a conversation with somebody, wherever they are, and we tend to kind of gravitate toward a certain ideology or a certain way of thinking about the world. But if you're passionate about something and you can connect with somebody on a certain level, I think you can absolutely bring them over to your side here on Metro Council today. And that has been refreshing for me.
That's good. That's good to know that's how you feel about things. I was curious as far as best piece of advice that you got from your mom or your dad.
Well, Dad's not really an advice guy. We talk about what's happening all the time, and I think we both enjoy that. But he's not one of those guys, he never has been, who sits you down and says, here's what I think you ought to do about this, that, and the other. But I will say, I went to him a couple of months ago, right after I was in office, and there was a constituent that had reached out who, let's just say, had not, in my opinion, been exhibiting very good behavior. And I had almost come to the conclusion that I was going to tell that constituent that, at least for now, I was not going to meet with them because of the way the behavior they had exhibited. And Dad kind of said, you know what, you might want to think a little bit more about that. What do you really have to lose by going ahead and meeting with them and trying to hash it out? And I went ahead and did that, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. The meeting went well. We were able to talk about a lot of different things, and I think made some real progress from a relationship standpoint, but also from a policy standpoint. And he suggested that I do that, and it was the right advice.
Don't close that door.
Right.
Keep it open.
Keep that line of communication
Keep
open. I think it would be, and listen, that's my tendency anyway. It's just in this case, I was like, ugh, I don't know. This doesn't feel
You took the gamble.
Yeah, so I went ahead and went with that advice, and that was good advice.
I love that. So, not an advice guy, but what would you say, just looking at your dad and his overall life, the lesson learned from your dad in that way?
Well, I mean, I guess I start with integrity. I mean, when you walk the walk, that, especially over time, builds respect, and people appreciate that. And if I can do that anywhere near as well as he has done that, which is doing it for the right reasons and making decisions for the right reasons, then that's a win. That's success. Another thing I would say about him is he tends to always give people the benefit of the doubt. He always tends to see the positive in people.
Are you agreeing with that?
Generally speaking, a few times in my life, I've paused and said, how many people do I really dislike? And it is a short list.
He gives people.
It really is.
I want to know who's even on it, for heaven's sake.
Let's not go there. That's probably not.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a short list. Happily, it's a short list.
Well, I can see that. So let's flip the table just a little bit, because I'm a firm believer that children can also teach the parents valuable lessons.
Yeah.
What would you say Andrew has taught you?
Well, this is a little broader, I think. I think Andrew is gifted for the work that he's doing here in government. He's gifted in a way that I was not gifted, in the sense that I was always spread so thin with a community history role with a full-time job at the University of Louisville that demanded a schedule, and I did it. But Andrew has, I think, some unique abilities to focus and then engage and then listen and then share a perspective and then come toward a consensus. I did not have that kind of patience for this role in government. In addition to that, and it's related to it, I was never a strong, what I call, legislator. I probably didn't sponsor by myself, by my own initiative, more than 2 or 3 ordinances in the whole time I was here. Did I get under things and behind things and advocate for things and articulate things and be a public face for things? I think I was pretty good at that. But walking down the hall and gathering the opinions and building the consensus for a piece of legislation for 25 other people, I just never was good at that. I think he is gifted in that
I'm
way.
going to be a deal maker in a way that I don't think Dad was.
That's right.
And part of that comes from my background. I mean, what do I do? We do deals. We do business deals.
That's interesting,
We do real
though.
estate deals. And so I love that process. I love the process of deal making and closing a deal. And so I think I'll be more involved in behind the scenes kind of negotiating within the caucus and within the whole group. Trying to say, let's try to head in this direction on this particular thing.
So I want to kind of end with the way we started when I said, like father, like son, question mark. So let's end that, ways that you all think, you just said a way that you think you're different, more of a deal maker, that kind of thing. How do you all think you're alike?
Well, I think the 2 ways that I think we're really alike are, number one, we're both extremely curious about things. And that's something, and particular as it relates to, I think we would both talk about it this way. Cities and neighborhoods are sociological experiments at heart, right? You take a place, you dump a whole bunch of people on top of each other, and you say, good luck with that. How is that going to work? And that is fascinating. And I think it's fascinating to both of us. And we've always looked at this as a sociological experiment, and we can learn from what's happening around us. Like, do things work? Sometimes, frankly, I think they work better than you would ever expect them to, given what we're talking, that experiment we're talking about. So I think that curiosity and that interest in cities and communities and what makes them tick, what makes them work or not work, is something that we very much share.
We are different in that he is not, look, public image, meaning a town character. Is that a fair image? Have I cultivated that over 83 years? Yes.
You own it.
So the bicycle thing and the bus thing and the picking up litter thing and the at one point when I had hair, the Lincoln S thing, that all of that kind of cultivation. Did I daily think about cultivating a town character image? No, I did not, but clearly I leaned into it. I don't think Andrew has that kind of tendency. He's going to be shyer, more reserved, more direct, more focused, but not cultivating this town character kind of.
Would you agree with that, Andrew?
Most certainly.
Said the quiet Andrew.
I've been saying that I'm quiet. Tell my colleagues I'm quiet after I'm like telling them the last thing I'm going to say. And then 30 minutes later, I'm still like,
Maybe compared to Dad. All right, we're going to end it with this. I want you to think of one word of how you would describe each other. Just one word. So, Andrew, for your dad, one word to describe him.
well, I'll go with storyteller.
I like that. He certainly is.
My word is focused, committed. That's 2 words. Focused / committed.
Well, both of you. And thank you for your service, your lifetime of service, and being such a character that we've grown to love throughout the years and leaning into that. And Andrew, our best for you in public service. Sounds like at least like father, like son, doing it for the right reasons. And we thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today with a discussion with the Owens. We'll be back on Tuesday, May 23rd to learn about the mayor's budget proposal and how you can get involved. Until next time.